I have a second?
Second. No, go ahead.
All right, motion by Mr. Gooch, seconded by Mr. Richards. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, the agenda has been unanimously approved. Moving on, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Mr. Gooch, second by Mr. Harper. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, minutes have been unanimously approved. Moving on to our first open issue, we will talk about capital projects. So those that are listening at long range, here we go.
Deja vu.
Okay, so I'm gonna put this up on the screen, but because it is difficult to see and there's so many words and so many numbers, we did provide handouts for everybody as well. There are the two attachments to this item. One is which is a list that you see on your screen that looks like this, that has the individual list and location of the description and amount of each capital project that we're recommending for approval. And then we have the second spreadsheet that looks like this, that has it broken down in just a different way. Again, same list of projects on there, just broken down by funding source so that you can see which pot of money that each project is coming out of. And so, again, I'm going to talk about this spreadsheet first, which is the top part of that spreadsheet shows what our fund balances are in the capital projects fund coming in, which will start out the 24-25 fiscal year. And then again, we have some in the far left column is our local revenue, which is recurring revenue. And so that's the revenue that is recurring, is annual, that will go in there, again, largely funded by our current property taxes, which is about $3 million. So our property tax levy, which is set in August of each year, a portion of that overall operating levy, which is $5 and some change, 0.1 goes into our capital projects fund, and that is what the equivalent of that is, about $3 million. As you can see, that's the largest line item there at the top of recurring revenue. We do have some other smaller sources of revenue. Again, interest revenue is pretty significant the last couple of years on our interest on investments that is going into the capital projects fund. And then the last line before the green bar for our total projected revenue is what we call as our other financing sources, which is our transfers. That's how a Department of Elementary and Secondary Education term, but is essentially a transfer from other funds into our capital projects fund. And so there are several items that show up on this list that obviously are not requested by schools, but that we are statutorily required to pay, such as the principal and interest payment on this building, because that was a debt mechanism through a certificates of participation. That's a lease purchase type agreement arrangement. We're not allowed to use general obligation bonds for that. It is a transfer from the operating fund into the capital projects fund each year to be able to fund that. The same thing is similar to the nature school debt that was taken out on that project. We have principal and interest that is for the nature school and $200,000 and some change that we are transferring from the operating fund into the capital projects fund each year. And then, as we talked about in long range, a large portion of that transfer line going forward is going to be from the operating fund to fund our technology services devices. Historically, that has been something that was a supply item because it was less than $1,000. Now, because it meets the DESI threshold of capital, because each one of those individual devices, specifically for our staff devices that are being replaced next year in the $3 million range, total for all of those devices, we have to make a transfer from our operating fund that would have been purchased out of their operating supply budget, which will now go into the capital projects fund to be able to fund those devices. Again, the same source that we have, we're just moving it from one fund to another.
What is that threshold?
The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education says any individual piece of equipment that's over $1,000 individually has to be purchased out of the capital projects fund. So if it's a bunch of desks and tables and chairs that are not over $1,000 individually, but are, and that's still supply. But if it's some of these laptops now, like the staff devices that we're going to be replacing are now all individually over $1,000. Again, our iPads are still under that, but our staff devices specifically for next year that are being replaced are all individually over $1,000. And so that's why that has to now come from the capital projects fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then as we move across that, again, we have a few dollars left in our ESSER money. Again, that goes until September 30th, 2024 for the ESSER 3 funding. The majority of those projects that we have seen over the last couple of years will be finalized by the end of this fiscal year, but there are some ongoing projects that you guys have seen. You board members have approved some contracts that will happen this summer once students are out of buildings, specifically the Rockbridge High School HVAC project is the largest one on the list, but you've also seen the finalization of the boardroom upgrades is happening this summer. And then you've seen the Jeff Middle School chiller replacement and some of these other contracts, the Oakland chiller replacement that will happen this summer, and we'll use up those remaining funds. And then the bond funds we just had our second $40 million. Again, it's slightly over $40 million if you see at the top of our projected balance rolling forward, and that's because we had some premium on the bonds that was generated when we sold those bonds in the range of about $2 million. And so really the only thing that's out of that most recent bond issue that we just did in March will be we had to pay our bond counsel and our financial advisor and some of those other bond fees for ratings and those such things that will come out in the current year. But the large majority of that, again, is rolling forward to next year, and that's going to fund those three major bond projects: our Career Center addition and renovation, our Battle Elementary School addition, and then the new Southwest Elementary School project, as well as our final round of safety and security secured vestibule projects that are being funded with those bond issues. So tonight, I think the main thing that we want to talk about are the new projects that we are going to fund for the 24-25 school year from our local capital projects funding. And so that is what you can see up on the screen, and on the first page is easier to see. All those local projects that are new, that are for the current, or for the recommended for the 24-25 fiscal year, are indicated on this page. And so we can walk through, again, if you have any questions, Randy can help me as well, but we can talk through some of the different things and how the decisions were made, but to arrive at some of these things. But again, when we're prioritizing things, we get lots and lots of requests, and we know the facility audits have deferred maintenance in the $300 million range. I think we've received requests from schools and various departments in the $40-some million range, and we have to whittle that down to the amount of money that we have each year in recurring revenue. And so we do go through a prioritization process. We know, again, that we have to do the envelope of the buildings first, then systems, and then cosmetic things come after that. We are a school district, so there's some curricular needs, things that are come through each year that we want to try and make sure that we are accommodating those needs as well. Specifically the technology items, but also some of our different curricular departments, like our practical arts department and our science department and our fine arts department, that have specific requests that typically get some sort of funding each year to be able to meet those needs.
On these, the large items on here,
Yes.
the new elementary school, the addition into the career center, are those numbers inclusive of the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment in the project, or is that different?
What a great question. We just talked about this with our construction manager at Risk today. So we have a portion, just like when we were talking about the $1,000 threshold. If there is FF&E, or which is our furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that is less than $1,000, that's going to go into these new building projects. What I always tell people, and when we're explaining about bond money, we don't like to use 20-year debt on things that don't last 20 years. And so things that typically are under $1,000, if you could take the building upside down and shake it out, stuff that's going to fall out, like tables and chairs and stuff that are not $1,000, we have a separate fund in the operating fund, we have a one-time need for those large projects, like I have in a couple years when we're gonna do a purchasing career centers next year, then Battle Elementary, and so I have what we call one-time FF&E needs out of the operating fund that will go to furnish those things that are less than $1,000 that go into those buildings. And so that is an addition to what you see that's coming out of bond funding. And again, the amounts that you see for those, specifically for those bond projects, I do like to say, like, we budget the full amount of the project. Some of these, for example, for the Career Center, we have about 19.5 million that you see that's going to roll forward. We have a little over 5 million that will already have been spent. And so that total project is in the $24.5 million range. But what we have left to spend over the next, the remaining amount of that project is in the $19.5 million range. We do budget full amounts of the projects going, even if we don't plan to spend it in the 1 year, because when you have a contract, that creates a liability, and we want to make sure that when we're rolling money for that, we have the amount of money that we need to fund the full amount of the project. So kind of switching gears back to your the local funded projects. Again, the first one on your list, this is alphabetical order, again, not priority order. The administration building, just so everyone doesn't think that the administration building is priority one.
I think we
It's
should start
A at
calling
the
it Z
beginning of
administration
the.
building.
We do have to fund at least our principal and interest payment on the building, so that's $418,000. And then we are at a maximum capacity where we need additional space for offices and conference room space in this building. And so there is a storage area downstairs, and so we are going to have to make some renovations to be able to get everybody that we need in this building, and be able to have it be useful to all of us. And so that has a $500,000 price tag, and then it's also going to include the storage, removing the storage that's downstairs and having a separate area. Again, the project, we don't have to know the full scope of the project yet, but we're going to have someplace else then to put that stuff, and that will be included in that amount as well.
Can you just remind me, how much longer do we have on the certificates of participation on that one?
So 2011, and I think, but is when we moved into this building, and so it's 2024, so if we do the math, like 7 years left-ish.
I thought it was right around 2030,
Yes,
2032,
yeah.
somewhere right around
Yeah,
there.
so that'll
right?
be the
Okay.
end of the 20 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Benton, again, we talked a little bit about at our last meeting, like we do try and do, when there's some large scale work, doing some like bundles, some projects that are happening. So Benton is having the big secure vestibule project with an addition that's actually being built out to be able to do that secure vestibule. So this is a partial roof replacement as well, with that building being shut down. So $250,000 for that. Battle High School, this is both curricular and co-curricular request. They do not have a dedicated wrestling room, and so, but there is some space that we are going to have again, the price tag on an actual multi-purpose building that is not something that we can fund within the money that we have available currently. It would have to come from a future bond issue, but we're able to renovate some of their existing areas so that they currently only have one weight room, which the other two high schools have two. And so we're going to renovate some to add a second weight room and that wrestling room that they're requesting there at Battle High School. They also do not have a utility vehicle, and if you've ever been out to that campus, it's kind of spread out, and so that's coming from athletics. They have a very old golf cart that's on its last leg, and so we are funding that a utility vehicle for $12,000 for them to use out there. Under my chief financial officer, we do always have some sort of unallocated lines for emergent needs that come up during the year, so that I can transfer if something comes up from that line to fund projects that come up during the year. The Career Center always has a line for grant matching funds. Again, they have various different mechanisms for grant funding through the state, through enhancement grants and other career and technical education grants. Some are 50-50 match, some are 75-25 match, but that's our portion of that we would have to match for any grants that they receive. Also, the Career Center has historically had two full-size school buses for curricular needs, getting classes to work sites and such. And with the workforce development, the buses are no longer functional, and so it's time to be able to do the workforce development stuff that we need to do with classes, and also with the CTSO, with some of our clubs and our FFA, that school bus that could be funded through the Career Center. Community Relations has some requests for some additional cable cast server and some new computer and cameras that are old and antiquated, so that $56,000 for that. And then Field School, which houses our gifted education program and also our scholar clinic, and we're requesting additional fencing around the playground there for $35,000 and some parking lot improvements for $60,000. The next several lines, 12 through 15, are from requests from our fine arts department, and also piggyback with some of our schools also request some of the same things. We usually have an allocation for our musical instruments that cost over $1,000, like our some of our orchestra instruments and our tubas and those big things that are over $1,000. For the line is $138,000. And then we want to keep the instruments that we're purchasing safe, so there was some instrument storage requested at Lang Middle School for those instruments, and for their theater storage at $21,000. And also some additional instrument storage for Rockbridge High School at $9,400. And then for theater portion of fine arts, we've done a rotational basis. You've seen the last several years, different middle schools getting replacement stage curtains, and so Gentry's the next one on the list for the rotation for stage curtain replacement. Also at Gentry Middle School, this was coming from the PE department, as well as the school has requested. Gentry is still our largest in our number of enrollment of students at that school, and it's important for them to be able to run two PE classes at the same time in the gymnasium. And so their divider in their gym is not functional right now, and so to replace that divider so that they can continue to run those classes. And Hickman has several items then on the list as well. Again, the bus loop and sidewalk, sidewalk ADA improvements in their north entrance there where they drop off students, $250,000. And then the softball, baseball, dressing room renovations. This is on the west side of the building where the current baseball, softball concession stand area is. Do some renovation in that area that I believe also the PTA or the Booster Club is adding some funds for. And then replacement of the weight room equipment at $80,000.
I had a quick question,
Yes.
since you brought that up. How often does PTA play a role in, I assume if a school says, hey, we would like this, and our PTA is ready to pay for a quarter or half of it, does that impact the district's decision on whether or not this is a project that's worth funding? Or,
I mean, we usually see at least one or two each year. I know Rockbridge had done some stuff with their building with the softball dressing room and changing rooms outside of their building. And so occasionally, yes, that we'll see some bundling of those type things.
because it seems like a lot of times, a lot of their requests will be, like this, it's, they would like this, and, hey, we like weight room equipment. But it's like sometimes a PTA will just, hey, we need to raise the money to buy it, and the PTA will just do it themselves.
Right.
100% versus
Right.
trying to go halvesies, so.
And so I know the weight room equipment has, because some schools, like the Rockbridge has some newer equipment, but it's more of an equity thing to make sure that the equipment is equitable between schools. And it's the same thing with the battle weight room, that they have the space and the equipment that they need for all students to have access to the same, similar types of equipment and space. Nutrition, the nature school, again, we talked about that, that's just the lease purchase payment. We do expect that building the construction to be finalized in June of this year. And so this is just the lease purchase payment to repay the principal and interest payment on the debt for $238,000.
In how many years will that extend?
I think that's 20 years as well, if you multiply that up.
And
Yes.
is this amount the CPS amount, or do we get some additional amounts from other entities that are also participating?
So this is the $2.5 million in debt that CPS took out that we dedicated towards that project. Nutrition services, again, Lena has her some equipment on a rotational basis. She's requesting $96,000 in various equipment at various schools. Physical education department as well has been on a rotational basis to do some acoustical panels, which is also an ADA thing in the gymnasiums at elementary schools. This is the last round. She's had it on a 3-year cycle. I think this is the last allocation to be able to finish those at our elementary schools. Practical arts, again, we are requesting a laser cutter for Rockbridge High School for $13,000. Also at Rockbridge, our 50-year-old planetarium is now on the equipment there is running its useful life. And so if we want to continue to use that in the way that we have, we need to upgrade that equipment. Again, the next several lines, 25 through, is technology services line items. So again, our backup server replacements, our staff devices, switch replacements, and upgrade to our storage system. There are several of these things that you guys have seen, and some are also partially funded by E-rate funding. And then West Boulevard, we have playground improvements. Again, this is not they have various playgrounds at West Boulevard, but this is specifically for the pre-K, the little playground area, and that will be ADA compliant. The roof replacement, again, this is most of but not where they built the new addition, but the roof replacement on West Boulevard Elementary. And then the last several items there are at West Middle School, some flooring upgrades. The fax kitchen, we had Gentry the current year, and West Middle School is the next one for the family and consumer science. Again, that's partially curricular in need. And then our media center renovation, which Carrie Townsend and her department works with to get some of those media centers. And since we'll have West Middle School shut down, we're gonna do that project there. And then some track standards, West Middle School out here with the high jump and the pole vault track standards, needs some equipment for some safety purposes for $20,000. And so our total of those new projects is $9,278,950. And then at the top of the next page, if you scroll down, is some of our projects that we have ongoing in the current year that will roll forward into the next year. And so the first one, Benton is having some flooring upgrades. You guys have, the board has already approved the construction contract on that. And so that will move forward and it will happen this summer. Derby Ridge, again, they had flooring upgrades. They had one floor happen last summer. We plan to do the other floor this current summer. We've been doing with our water quality review and the drinking fountain replacement in conjunction with that, with the statutory requirements for that. And then our two big projects at Gentry, our fax kitchen and then the regular kitchen that we've already approved construction contracts are that are gonna roll forward. Hickman's gonna have phase 2 of their media center to finish that out this summer. And then the Rockbridge High School, the performing arts, we already approved that contract a couple months back as well. That's gonna happen and roll forward from June into July. And then we have our final, like I was talking about, our ESSER funded projects. A couple of these are gonna roll over after June 30 as well. We're gonna have finalize the audio-visual upgrades to the boardroom here. We have the chiller replacement at Jeff Middle School in Oakland. And then we have the large finalization of the HVAC project and the air handling units at both Oakland and Rockbridge that are gonna roll forward. And then our outdoor nature play areas was an allocation that was in our original ESSER funded stuff that you guys are gonna see a contract on Monday night for those of you on the board to move forward with those, to replace some of those playground pieces that were taken out. And we're going to fund those again with our federal dollars.
And are all these ESSER funds
Yes.
then, so they
Yes.
have to be done by September, is that
3rd.
correct? Okay.
Correct, yes, yes. And they're probably tired of listening to hear me say that. If we are not done by September 30th, we need to have all bills in before September 30th.
We reiterated that today with them.
Yes.
A frequent reminder.
I'm like, If we have to threaten, it's gonna come out of your own pocketbook if it is not done by September 30th. And then the final page just shows our bond funding. Again, those are the remaining amounts on our bond projects, our elementary school, our Battle Elementary addition, Career Center construction and expansion, and then our various secured vestibule projects, largely our Ridgeway and Benton projects. And then I think we have Douglas and Field and some other smaller projects that will most likely, you've already approved the contract, but will roll past June 30 on those as well. Again, so our grand total capital spending that we have, again, $89,018,950. And if you see on your other spreadsheet, we're using basically every dollar that we have available. And so what I am suggesting after the consensus that we received from our long-range planning committee is that since we do have fund balance in our operating fund currently, Rosetta, the improvements that need to be made to the Rosetta building, that was previously our old Cedar Ridge. Like, we were never originally, when we opened the new Cedar Ridge, intended for that building to be used in the way it is now. It's used in a different programmatic way, and we don't foresee that going away. And so we're gonna have to continue, if we're going to continue to use that building, we're gonna need to be doing some upgrades to that building. But at a $1 million price tag, it keeps getting pushed because it's a third of the recurring money that we have each year. And so my suggestion, if it is the consensus of the group, would be to do a one-time transfer of $1 million from the operating fund to be able to take care of that, so we can make those upgrades to that building for the 24-25 school year, so we can mark that off the list, and it's not a project that we continue to see, because we really want to make sure that we do have that programmatic needs that are happening in that building, that we want to make sure it's safe and that it's upgraded and the facility is can be used to the best of the ability that we have for the capacity there.
And that would be funded via the 23-24 fund balance or previous
No, so it
years?
will be, well, the operating fund, because, and we've had a lot of discussions once we get into our 5-year balance, our 5-year model and the when we switch back gears over to the operating fund, about how we've built up fund balance over the last several years, and that we have, so we do have existing fund balance that is available in the operating fund that we would be able to do a one-time transfer. Again, it's not a recurring need, it would be a one-time need that we'd be able to transfer from the operating fund over to the capital projects fund that's not currently in the capital projects fund, and to be able to fund that additional project.
And what does that take away from? Because eventually that money would have been earmarked for something. So what does it reduce that you're gonna have a need for in the future on funding?
I mean, 80% of the operating fund is salaries and benefits, but as you'll see as we walk through the compensation update that we do here, I think we are pretty aggressive in that we're able to meet the needs that we are. I mean, we'd always like to give more, but we're able to do the things that we want to do within the 5-year model that we want to do with compensation. But I mean, so that's why I'm saying if it's a time now, if you want to consider something like that, when we talk about what the future looks like for funding at the state level and other things, it might not be something that we can do in the future, but it is something that's available now that we could do, I feel comfortable making a recommendation that we could do that one time.
And would this allow us to increase the number of students at Rosetta, or is this just to maintain the number of students at Rosetta?
And so it's just to maintain, and so right now there's those district classrooms there, but there's also some other itinerant office space and other needs as well.
There may be some recouping of some space that's not in real good condition, workable. So not a significant change, but it would definitely make it where that entire building, it would be usable, because there are some things
That is not usable.
that aren't meeting what we're doing right now.
So it would help at least improve the program for the students
Yeah.
that go there.
Oh,
right now.
absolutely,
Okay.
and,
Okay.
you know,
How old
I
is
mean-
that building?
that was, it was built in the 50s. And, you know, when we moved to Cedar, it was one of those that we didn't really know if we would use it or even continue with it. But as programs have grown, it was a good fit for the size of the programs. but we need to go in and really update it. Because when we moved out of it, it was probably one of the buildings in the district that had the least amount of, had the least amount of attention for a long time.
It's also in the facility audits, I mean,
Yeah.
bathrooms, significant needs, significant HVAC stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't
significant-
have HVAC everywhere. It still has some window units and stuff like that. So because it was kind of being thought to be decommissioned about the time, when all that was happening. So
Well, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
There's some significant risk putting that type of money in a building that's 70 years old.
yeah,
And there's always a concern is that you do this and it just doesn't extend the life of it to basically, I know this is a school, but to recoup your investment.
right.
Right. And so it's never going to be used as a regular school building again, but because of the different programmatic needs and office space that we have there, I think it can be used for the fun, just like, similar to like a field. Field is still a 100-year-old building, but it's not being used as a school building, but we have the Triple E program there and some office spaces and some other things that are happening, that it can still be used for different programming.
The usage isn't as dense or
Correct.
as congested as a school, but yet we still need some of that type space because we have programs that demand less.
We can get all this done for $1 million now versus piecemealing it over the next 10 years.
And it's
for-
already escalated, I mean, quite a bit over the last few years, and so that's why I feel like it would be the best use of our money to go ahead and get it done now, because I feel like it's went from $500,000 to 700,000 to 750, and now it's in the $1 million just in the last 5 years, and so to go ahead and be able to.
And this would be something that we could walk away from that for anything significant for a considerable amount of time. It's gonna put it in a good spot.
Will this reduce any ongoing maintenance costs by improving some of these?
Well, if nothing else, just with real HVAC, yes. I
Yeah.
mean.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing from what you're
We're
saying.
literally pulling, yeah, we're swapping out window units sometimes that, we used to have lots of them. Now we don't have as many, so I mean, yeah, and just to be able to get that building
I was gonna say, so we're gonna use
consistently.
less electricity?
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
Probably.
Right.
Well, and
I mean, we talked about that last month. Some of
Yeah.
these other HVAC upgrades have really had a significant impact on
Yeah.
our usage for sure, and our dollars as well.
And this is one of our, I mean, as you'll know with this program, I mean, this is one of our more vulnerable populations
Right,
of students. And so, I mean, it's one of those things of, I mean, I think about it from the fact of like, if we can get some AC units out of a window, that'd be great from a safety perspective.
And some ADA, I mean, it's special education is in this building, and some of those type things I think is important.
Okay.
So are you looking for a motion?
Yeah, I forgot for there to be
Make
a motion.
to amend the capital project list and add the Rosetta project to that list.
Second.
Cool. And since there wasn't, I messed up as chair and didn't have us have a motion up there before we did discussion. I'm gonna take that as not even like as an amendment, just more of that's the motion to approve this same
Including
with
the
that
Rosetta
included in
add.
it.
Okay.
And so,
But
motion by Mr. Eulis, second by Mr. Harper. What's the question?
do we have to make a motion to move the money, or is that,
Why, yes.
I would say that- I would
Well,
say yes.
he
that
did
is, that's
to
included in
include-
this?
yeah, to include that.
Okay.
That's true.
Yeah,
he got it.
We're approving the money and not the project.
Yes.
Yes, we're.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Approving the money move and recommending to the board to all this list of projects.
Yeah.
Does
So-
anyone object to that? Because I can split it up if
Yeah.
if any member objects to that kind of combining.
And so if everyone's all right with it, then the list that I will bring you on Monday night will include the additional $1 million transfer and the full Rosetta included in the list for you guys.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'm just gonna repeat it just so that those that might be listening or watching in the future know exactly what we're doing. The motion on the table is to recommend to the board approval of the 2024-2025 capital projects with a money transfer out of the operating fund
Balance into the
fund
capital.
balance over into the capital projects fund to add the Rosetta project to that list of capital projects. That's a long thing, but I hope that explains it well for folks. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, unanimously recommended. Moving on to our last open issue, financial update.
All right, so the next item, we have some pretty high ticket items on our list to discuss tonight with our $90 million in capital projects. So the next big thing, of course, is our compensation update. This is by far 80% of our operating budget comes from our salaries and benefits. And so we're going to walk through how much that's going to cost and the impact that we have to our operating budget and what that looks like on our 5-year model. Just a reminder, again, back in January when we started the budget process, the board and the finance committee approved our budget parameters and budget priorities that we are using as our guiding principles as we go through this budget process. Again, budget priority number 1 was to work on compensation. And so this is going to meet that need as we're looking at salary schedules and additional FTE adds that we have to our operating budget. And also our budget parameters, we have budget parameter number 3 was all about compensation as well. So when we're talking about when I'm building out our compensation and how much it's going to cost to do our salary schedules each year, the first thing we look at is what we call our cost to operate, or our step increases. Again, this is not any improvements to any individual schedules. This only includes stepping down. So when we look at a salary schedule, we have columns for various degrees of education, and then we have years for experience. And so when we talk about stepping, this is just stepping each one of our employees down from year 1 to year 2 or whatever subsequent years on their salary schedule. Again, no improvements to schedules. And then there are some schedules, just a reminder, there's some cells and some columns on schedules that you no longer, so once, like the teacher's salary schedule, for example, bottoms out at year 30. So if there's a teacher who's the year past year 30, you're no longer getting a step. Or the bachelor's degree column 1 on the teacher's schedule maxes out at certain years, so before year 30. And so those people, some of those do not get additional step increases, although they would get an additional increase if there's improvements to the schedule.
Does this include an estimation of people that are going to move to the right?
Yes, so we do have a amount in the overall summary at the end that
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, yes. And so again, there are certain, depending on placement on schedules, there are individual employees that might not receive a step increase. But then these are the different, what you see on this slide there are different groups of employees' salary schedules. And then what we have seen historically for the average, again, this is just a step, and then what those percentages are for each one of those groups. And so our teachers there at the top receive on average about a 2% increase each year. So without any other improvements to the schedule, our teachers receive approximately a 2% increase, just a step from on the salary schedule. You can see as we put additional money into those salary schedules, it also gets more expensive to step everyone each year. And so you can see just from the teacher schedule, the average to step everyone $1,155 is the average that each person individually would get. The school professional schedules, and that's several schedules that are lumped together in that. It includes things like nurses, outreach counselors, parents as teachers, OTPTs, school sites, so there's homeschool communicators. So could range from anywhere from like 10 to 13 to 16 on each one of those schedules, but because of the number, it kind of skews on some of them because of there's a low number of employees that are on those schedules. We lump them together into one again, and it also makes a difference. That's why you see it looks like the average is going down for the steps, but because of the placement on some of those schedules where people are topping out and not receiving steppers, it really skews it because there's not the number where there's like 1,500 teachers on a schedule. This is like there's a much smaller number of employees that are on these schedules. And then we have the principals and our building administrators, coordinators, those are our curriculum coordinators again, and then the executive administrators. So I have created new schedules for the 24-25 school year for directors, assistant directors, executive directors, and cabinet that are now being pulled off of the salary non-scheduled, which is the line below that. So that's why there's no numbers for those in previous years. But again, the average increase you can see there, but it also skews the salary non-scheduled because of those larger dollar salaries that were on that schedule before. You're seeing a decrease between 23, 24, and 24, 25, so we're pulling those individuals off of the salary non-scheduled folks. Again, those are all, and the top from the salary non-scheduled up, again, those are all of our professional schedules, which are mainly certificated, and so those are, again, salary people, smaller percentages but larger dollar amounts. And then from our instructional aides, you can see the percentages, but in that group then with each of our hourly schedules from our classroom aides, paraprofessional, those individual percentages for steps are greater, but the dollar amount is lower just because of the individuals that are on those schedules. And so then the next slide then shows like what that equates to in dollar figures. And so the total, again, that is cost, including retirement, is now over $3 million just to step our employees each year. So that means we need an additional $3 million in new revenue each year just to step everybody on the salary schedule. So for 24, 25, we're projecting $3.386 million. And again, it's right under 2,800 FTE and the operating fund that is included.
And we're one of the few districts that have so many steps, correct?
And so there is a large variation between different districts, and we also have a large number of salary schedules in general, but for our teachers' schedule specifically, there are districts that step only through year 15, and there are districts that step through year 30. I did not find one that steps beyond year 30. We do step all the way through year 30, but there's several of our comparison districts that we use that only go to 20, 25. And so we are, as a retention, I mean, it's important to recruit people to get here, but it's also important to keep the people once we see. And so when we talk, HR talks about that, it is, you do see people after a certain amount that maybe at even some of our surrounding local districts that come here after because their top end of their salary schedule is not nearly as competitive as what ours looks like in some of the smaller districts around this area. So 3.3 million for steps, and so then this is what we're proposing for our increases for actual salary schedule improvement. So our overall salary cost that we want to put into salary schedules is $7.6 million, and then the benefit costs on that, which of course retirement and Social Security and Medicare and those type things are percentage based. So as our salaries go up, then the percentage of that benefit costs also goes up. And so the total allocated for salary schedule improvements with benefits is right under $8.8 million. Again, all of this is related to continued recruitment and retention that we have seen, not just teacher shortages, but within all of our CSIP goal, number 2, deals with recruitment and retention, and we're continuing to put money into our salary schedules to remain competitive, not only with other school districts, but also with the industry, with our hourly folks as well. And out of the $7.6 million that we saw for salary costs, $4.6 million of that is what is allocated for the teachers, is what they have tentatively agreed on with the collective bargaining process. They are ratifying their agreement next week, and so that won't come to the board until the work session, but tentatively 4.6 of the 7.6 is going to be allocated for the teacher's salary schedule for the 24-25 budget. And so again, this then increase that we're talking on this slide then shows what we saw before, the step increment percentage. Then we see the improvement to the schedules for the total percentage increases for each one of our categories there. Again, teachers, again, large majority of the total funding is allocated to our teachers for next year. Teachers are receiving, they're currently, their beginning salary is $40,900. They're receiving a $2,100 on the base to a $43,000 starting salary for the 24-25 school year. And we've also tentatively agreed to a 3-year agreement for the collective bargaining. And so with the salaries, they've agreed to $2,100 for the first year and then $1,000 additional. And so that is also important for recruiting, as we're able to be able to go to career fairs and be able to make offers earlier in the year. And so they know what their salaries will be now for the next 3 years. So $43,000 for 24-25, $24,000 for 25-26, and then $45,000 for the following year. And so we do have the ability to go back, and if there is additional funding, to reopen that, but at least we have that locked in over the next 3 years. And so that will really help us, I feel like, with the recruiting. So that increase, again, for just the 24-25 school year is a 7.13% increase to the teacher's salary schedule. And so we tried, when we're doing our other salary schedules, to get them in a similar range, so between 5 and 6% is what the other salaried schedules are like. Again, the step increments, again, vary a little bit, so it skews it a little bit, but all of the schedule improvement is, but you can see there for those, the top half from the salary non-scheduled up is all in the between 3 and 4%. Again, the school professional schedules, because nurses are in there and some other stuff that we had to make some improvements that were a little higher than the average, is why that one looks a little bit more. But all the other, the principals, the coordinators, the administrators, the salaried non-scheduled people are all receiving in the 3.5 range. And again, so that total, then the range for overall improvements, including steps, is in the 6.5% range. And so then the bottom half, again, we tried to do it at a minimum additional $1 on the base for our hourly schedules. We got to the $15 an hour last year. Again, that was part of our budget parameters that we approved to improve that from $15 to $16 for the minimum for our custodians and some of our other hourly schedules, classroom aides. So to be able to do that, again, percentages are higher, but the dollar amounts are lower. So you can see in the 8% range is what those hourly schedules are receiving for next year. Yeah.
In those positions, has the rate of turnover slowed down?
So we have seen less openings for our classroom aides than pre-COVID, for sure. Like there was our classroom aides, look in the 2020, 2021, there was probably 50% of those positions that were open. We're in a much better spot that we are now. Our paraprofessionals, our special services department said, they haven't seen this many, paraprofessionals filled in years as well. So that's really helped, I think. Our nutrition custodians a lot better.
Yeah.
Instead of 30 and 40 positions open, we're, down to single digits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, yes.
Yeah, it's helped.
Again, the other thing I just wanted to, because of that executive administrative, those are new schedules. That percentage is a little bit skewed as well, because everyone that was a salaried, non-scheduled person had to be artificially placed on a column and a step on the new schedules. And the first run, there were some people that were before, that were below the minimum on the new schedule. And so those people had to be raised, and so that kind of makes that amount higher than than some of the other schedules, but trying to be within that range.
What's an example of someone who's an executive
So,
administrator?
so the directors, assistant directors, executive directors, and cabinet. So there's a new schedule for each one
That
of
new
those.
section, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and so there was people under 110,000 as the starting salary for directors, for example, and there was some people that were moved to directors that were underneath that amount that had to be placed onto the schedule, and so that's why that amount is a little higher than it would. I tried to get it in the 3% range, but because it skewed it a little bit, because some of those people are receiving to get them up to the minimum salary.
So before we were kind of ballparking it, everybody kind of had their own individual thing, and this has normalized it all out to.
So that each year that you'll go from one step to the next step for those specific people that are on those
Cool.
schedules.
Thank you.
Okay, so then the next slide then shows the average salaries. Again, this is just average, so as we're continuing to put money into each one of these different groups, you can see the teachers over the last 5 years have increased the average teacher salary from 56,000 to over almost 62,000 is what we're projecting for the 24-25 school year. Those school professional schedules, again, it includes the list of what is included in that. And then the executive administrators as well, shows cabinet directors, assistant directors, and what's included in that, and those are new schedules as well. And again, that average looks like it's going up because we had to pull some people up to the bottom to get onto the first step of those schedules. And the other salary non-scheduled, again, that one looks a little off too because we pulled some of those higher salaries off of that schedule. But you can see specifically like down in our hourly schedules, some of those have had significant increases. Our classroom aides, going over the last several years, even our secretarial and others that are on those hourly schedules have had significant increases over the last 5 years. We do not plan, because we're in our, we'll be in our 3rd year of our agreement with our providers for UMR, for our health insurance and Delta Dental. We're locked into rates, but we are self-funded, but we don't expect to have our amount per employee to, again, this is totally board funded for all individual employees, to increase, but it is significant. And so I always like to show this slide because it is advantageous for us to have some of those contract pricing locked in for 3 years. And so then after we do that, then we have, now the next couple slides show what we have, what we are proposing for each one of our additions for recurring individual positions for the 24-25 school year. We received lots of requests. Again, Heather's not in her office deciding who gets what. It is a long, multi-month collaborative process of many meetings and they're sick of me showing them the list and making them reiterate what our priorities are every month. But I think this is what we are proposing in our overall list of FTE additions. Again, it couldn't all be fit on one slide, so there's multiple slides, and I'll just go over the grand total at the end.
And these are brand new to the district positions.
Except for the they're not new, they're additional. Some of the teaching staff, obviously we have teachers, but they're additional positions above what we currently
Right.
have.
So for example, and I apologize if I'm skipping ahead, but I just
Yes.
want to make sure I understand before we start. EL teachers, 3. It's
Correct.
3
New.
brand new to the district employees,
Additional.
okay.
Yes, and so those 3 EL teachers, again, we tried to I tried back to what our budget priorities was and our CSIP goals. Our budget priority number 6 was about our English language. We talked about the enrollment and the explosion of the numbers that we have. The caseloads are way over what the DESE recommended minimum or maximums are for those. And so this is 2 elementary teachers and 1 middle school teacher for a total of 3 EL teachers. Our elementary classroom teachers, we've talked about this a couple because we did move ahead. And when we talked about our priorities, we want to make sure that there are lower class sizes in our Title I eligible elementary schools compared to our overall. By changing the denominator to change the class sizes to a lower for our title schools, that required an increase in 8 overall FTE at the elementary level for core classroom grade level teachers. And so that is about $500,000 for that. And then the middle school is largely, again, there's 8 additional middle school teachers, but this is largely due to enrollment numbers. And so, because when we have people matriculating into the middle school level, the 8th grade class will those of you who were at the long-range committee, she showed like the 8th grade class is a very small class. So that class will be moving out of middle school into high school. The 5th grade is a larger class, so that our overall enrollment at middle school, because of the teaming mechanisms that we use for those classes at the middle school level, is requiring a team, which is at least 2 teachers at multiple different of our middle schools. And so that's a total of 8 that we're requesting at the middle school level. And then the next 2 are what we are instructional mentors and our counselors that we said that we would absorb after the ESSER funding went away. And so there was 5 ELA and 5 math instructional mentors at the elementary level for a total of 10. And so that's $875,000 that we're absorbing that was on that temporary funding. The same thing for counselors. Again, that is linked to also one of our budget priorities with our social emotional stuff that we want to continue. We don't want to cut counselors. We want to be able to continue to have those people that we've added over the last couple of years. And so that's additional 4 counseling positions that we'll absorb onto district funding next year. And then because of the instructional mentors is something that came out of the curriculum audit and that has been recommended through various things to be able to coach up the teachers that we have and provide internal professional development. And it's something that we've done the last couple of years with our elementary and our middle school, at the elementary and middle school level. And so something that was requested by all 3 of our high schools is to have an instructional mentor located at each one of our high schools. And so that is a 3 additional FTE for Hickman, 1 for Hickman, 1 for Battle, and 1 for Rockbridge for next year. And then our nature school teachers, again, that building will be fully completed at the end. And so this is something that will, we've had different grants that you guys, the board has seen. And so in lieu of some of the ARPA funding that we have received through the county and the city, in lieu of donating towards construction of that project, they, like the most recent $200,000 grant that we received in ARPA funding is to fund these positions for the first year. And so it's something that we will absorb after that, but they are funded by the grant for the first year. So 3 additional teacher. We currently have 1 lead teacher that is at the nature school designated there now. And so with that being fully open next year, there'll be 4 then to partner with the teachers that are coming from the schools for next year. Alternative school, again, that is something that we have also said is a priority for next year. That's 3 additional staffing. We do have at our current ACE, we have 1 person there, and so this is to add an additional 3 people, so 1 at the high school and 1 at the elementary level plus an aide, and then we're going to use the existing lead teacher that we had at ACE to be able to provide alternative school setting for all levels for our secondary and our elementary as well. And then Battle High School, we talked about when we were talking about our capital projects. We are doing a renovation of the weight room, which is going to allow them to have additional space that they didn't have before. So this affects our PE and health. Also, health is no longer being offered during the summer. So this is an addition of 2 FTE at Battle High School. Again, it's related back to both budget parameter 8 and 9 to be able to access those additional teachers at Battle High School for $125,000. And then the 1 learning specialist, and this is because of overall numbers matriculating out of our early childhood special education into our district programs. And so this is 1 learning specialist FTE. I'm sure they would like more, but again, we all know this is some of the hardest positions that we have to fill right now as well. And so 1 additional learning specialist for next year. And so the total FTE just on this page is 45 and right over $3 million. And again, one of our budget priorities was also exceptional students, and so that includes our special services, and so that's how that relates back to that. So the next slide, we continue on here. We still do have several students that do virtual education, and so we have an online program, but we do have seen over the last, as we had a new online administrator this year, that's watching those numbers very closely, and if we're going to continue to offer online, there's a large lack of engagement of students that are online and poor academic achievement. And so to be able to try and help with that, we are approving an additional counselor for our virtual education, for someone to be touching base with those students that are online, and so that they have some contact. The current model, like we're still connected back to some of their counselors at their schools, but when there's already 2,000 other kids at a high school, then it's difficult to keep track of those students. So we're gonna have someone that's dedicated to those students. Gifted teacher, we're going to split, this is at the high school level. Hickman and Rockbridge currently have caseloads of over 250 students for gifted education at the high school level, which is large, way over the DESE recommended maximum for those caseloads. And so that also related back to our budget priority number 5 with our exceptional students. And so we're gonna have one FTE that we split between those two schools. At the high school level, the BSSA is our security assistants at those schools, and so I know we'll have the final read for our new security and weapons detection system on Monday night at the board meeting. So in order to man the open gate system, we're gonna need an additional FTE to be able to help with that, and it will also be during the beginning and end of the school day, but also we'll be able to help with additional other security needs throughout the day, hall monitors type things as well. And so there's one at each one of our comprehensive high schools for 3 additional FTE. We're recommending an additional administrator at Jefferson Middle School. Again, this is not, when we say admin assistant, that's a administrator, not a clerical person. So that for additional support because of the numbers and the needs at that school. And then New Haven and Grant, we're recommending a split between assistant principal. New Haven is right now is the only title school without an assistant principal, and Grant, because of the increasing needs and numbers at that school, we're going to do a 2-day, 3-day something, a split where they're there multiple and can be.
I was just gonna ask, I was like, hopefully they're not trying to be at both schools in the same day, cause they're like on the others, that'd be a drive. Okay,
No.
I mean,
On the
I didn't
next.
see helicopter on the
Yes,
list, so.
no. The next several items have to do with our human resources department. Again, human resources was in our budget priority number 11. We're making sure that we have someone who is, we do have a recruiter now, but they're changing the needs of the department to have someone that is a recruitment that specializes, so that they're not doing all of the things that relate to, so someone can go out and do actual recruiting and not doing all the administrative stuff that goes with that, and can really focus in on recruiting. And then we currently have an assistant director that deals with all of the non-certified staff, but because of the similarities between those duties that he's handling for our non-certified compared to what the director's doing for the certified, we're recommending an increase so that they're at the same level. And then the compliance investigator, this will support both our HR and our community relations, we're largely looking for someone that has some paralegal skills that will be able to help with do investigations, grievances, and those type things. Also might be able to help with some sunshine requests and those for community relations as well. The recovery room, we've heard from several of our different principals that it's difficult to keep the instructional aides in those recovery room positions for the behavior, especially because it's an hourly position, and so it's gonna be expensive to be able to move all of those IAs to salary, but we agreed to pilot it at some of our higher needs schools for next year to see if the impact, and so we're piloting it at Parkade, Shepherd, Benton, and then at Lang Middle School and Battle High School to see if we can get someone consistent in those positions and get them filled.
In piloting that, if we were to decide we're not gonna no longer do it, what happens to those folks that have been on a salary schedule?
And so they would be, there's enough turnover each year. I don't know specifically, but like, I know we've talked about, like, when you're hired for the district, not necessarily even if a teacher's hired for a specific school. So most of them are gonna be teacher certified, that we would be able to move them somewhere else within the district. A homeschool communicator, we are gonna be moving forward with one additional homeschool communicator, and this is because of the change in population with the expansion at Russell and then splitting with Midway with the redistricting.
Do they have one at all?
No.
So they're gonna be splitting those two.
Yes, so it'll be something more of like a 3-2 split as well. And so Midway has some expanding homeless populations with the truck stop and the stuff out there as well, so we're gonna have some additional support. And then the final slide here, the data technology services one request that we are just agreed to move forward with was a data protection officer. This is becoming evident that this is a need with some of the different technology sharing and information sharing that we have with internal and external stakeholders to make sure that we're complying with everything that we need to comply with. So that's a one additional FTE. We still have some elementary schools that have health secretaries that are not full-time, and so to move those to full-time at each one, we need an additional 2 secretaries. The parent educator, this is something that the state's been able to put more money into our Parents as Teachers program over the last few years. We currently don't have enough staff to be able to complete the number of visits to even be able to receive all the money that we can have allocated for us. And so this is, again, to be able to receive, it's partially funded by our Parents as Educators, our state funding. And it also relates back to the budget priority for our early childhood focus. The multicultural secretary, this is for, some of Carlos departments are sharing secretaries who are not all located in one. The departments individually are not all located in one. It's causing some different needs with people like she has student service, she also has a Max Scholars, and she also has Como Eds, who are all operating in different places and all kind of share one individual secretary. And so this is going to help with some needs for some clerical and some between those different departments. The workforce development director, again, this is the focus on our workforce development. This is not just at the Career Center. Last year, there was something that was allocated just at the Career Center. This is a district-wide position that will help focus all of our workforce development opportunities for the district. The next 2 are not additional FTE, but they're changed and from moving the admin assistant to assistant principal at Battle Elementary and for Alpha Hart Elementary. We did something similar at Derby Ridge a couple of years ago because of the number of non-tenured teachers that they have in those buildings. These are also 2 of our highest need comprehensive title buildings. And so to be able to provide additional instructional leadership and to be able to do evaluations for those teachers in that building, we're moving both of those to assistant principals.
Is it the same person, or is it would be a change in, that's a different role, isn't it?
Right.
Same person,
Same
they'll be
person.
changing titles and moving
Okay.
up.
Right.
And, yeah.
The admin assistant to me has been described as like, you're an underpaid assistant principal. You're doing a lot of the same stuff, but you're 100% not a secretary.
Most
You're
of
not-
those are aspiring.
So it's typically the same individuals that are on the assistant principal track, they just.
Correct, yeah, you're.
Correct, and so
yep.
they're usually aspiring administrators. It also helps with turnover because they use this as a stepping stone, and then it's a revolving door each year of the person then goes to be an assistant
You're-
principal somewhere else, and then
A
you have a new
classroom teacher
person.
wanting to test the waters of admin.
Correct.
So, yep.
Special services, we're recommending that go from director to executive director because it currently is one of the, when we moved some of our other positions to executive director last year, anyone that has a director reporting to them is an executive director because the special services has the early childhood who is a director underneath of them to move that up, so that's an executive director. Beulah Ralph has some did not have a recovery room person, so this is a behavior instructional aid because of the number of students that are at school and kind of the changing dynamics that with some additional needs there. We also are recommending additional mentors, teacher stipends that we don't currently have to kind of coach up some of our teachers that we have. This is part of our professional development and our looking at data and helping those teachers. And then our athletics, Misha is adding stunt and boys volleyball as next year as Misha approved sports. And so to be able to add the coaching stipends and the service and supply to start up those two things is about $100,000.
What's stunt?
Well, it's typical like
cheerleading, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
different. It's gonna be dope. It's gonna be really cool.
Okay, all right.
I'm telling, it's gonna be really cool.
Yes.
I'm
It's
not
gonna
gonna
be.
disparage the cheerleaders. It's
Yeah.
sounds good
Not
to me.
sitting right next to me, you're not
I
gonna.
mean,
Don't you do it.
so total overall proposed FTE additions is 62 FTE and right over $4.5 million in additional money that we're adding to our operating budget for next year. And so then the next slide then summarizes, I think Ryan was the one that asked earlier, like how that we come up to a bottom line. So our increases for salaries and benefits, against our cost to operate, 3.3 million. Then we have our increase to our salary schedules for improvement was 8.8 million. We have allowance for educational credit. This is for people to move from one column to another column. We also have some savings each year for retirees, resignations, our additional FTE additions and 4.5 million. So a grand total recommended increases for the 24-25 operating budget of over $16.5 million for the 24-25 budget. So then, the final slide then tonight is to talk about how does that impact our 5-year model. We talked a little bit last time about there was some good news coming out of the state, and without that, we would not have been able to put this additional money into compensation like we have. The state is proposing funding to increase the state adequacy target for 25 and 26. That's putting an additional $7 to $8 million into the state revenue that's able to go to fund this. We're also, as we talked about, our assessed valuation. We have conservative increases going forward, but we knew the last couple of years that our assessed valuation did come in higher. That again, that's recurring revenue than what we've seen and what we had budgeted for, and so that's going into fund balance that we're able to use then going forward as recurring revenue. Again, we're stepping all of our employees every year. We have additional funding for improvements to salary schedules, again, for the 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27 years with locked in for the teachers for 3 years. We also have funding for the new schools, any reorganization for when we open battle in the 26-27 school year. We have one-time needs when we talk about FF&E for the opening of those buildings as well. We also have in there, we've incorporated the increase for the transportation contract for the starting in the 25-26 school year. And then the big wild card that I would be remiss if we didn't talk about today is the legislation that is moving through for our charter school expansion that is Senate Bill 727. Our board president sent out the letter today, but requesting everything, but it's made its way through the House and it's currently making its way through the Senate. So we're continuing to work with the lobbyists and with our legislators, but I feel like some sort of this is going to, because it's attached to this education omnibus bill with other revenue, they're putting into the state. Whether or not they can appropriate it in future years is yet to be determined, but because it's linked to some possible additional revenue, some sort of version of this is probably going to pass. So and future years, again, it would not go into effect until the 25-26 school year, but probably would, again, local funding and state funding would follow any students. It's gonna be 100 to 200 students right off the bat, out of the gate. And so that's gonna affect what this looks like in future years. But again, we are, like when we're talking about fund balance, you can see we have, and the to end the school year, we're gonna have about $120 million fund balance. And so that $1 million, I think we can afford it in current years, and we have, again, our budget parameters and our CSIP says that we have 3 months of fund balance on hand in the 5-year model. And you can see that we meet that requirement in the model. We're going to be able to make that additional $1 million and still meet that requirement. So our fund balance percentage, again, we talked about, those of you who have been on this committee it used to be 3 months used to get us, was 18 to 20%. Now, 3 months is over 25%. And so as our additional monthly expenditure, as we're putting all of this additional money into salaries, it takes a lot more money each month to make payroll. And so you can see those average monthly expenditures, even in the 5-year model, increasing from 22.5 million to over 26.5 million just in this 5 years. And so that's significant increases going into compensation and to our employees.
Just to be gloomy, because that's what I do.
I know, I love it.
This also assumes that basically we're gonna go another 5 years without a recession.
Correct.
That impacts state revenues, and I believe the tax cuts at the state level are still phasing in.
Yes, yes.
So it's not gonna get any easier, it's gonna get more difficult.
And this assumes no additional tax money. There's no, like, if we were to go for additional tax levy, none of that would be as incorporated or accounted for in this as well.
And we don't, with last night, with the tax freeze passing Prop 1 for the county, depending on how the county commission and decides to operate that and implement it, depending on how that legislation that's currently in the state house, or the legislature to do some revamping of it, I mean, that's gonna impact any reassessments
And the
and
percentage
additional
for,
tax levies and anything like that too.
yes.
Yeah,
It
that'll
could,
be a
it could
future
affect
growth
our
problem.
self-valuation.
I think you'll be okay with it.
Yes. It could very well, so that's why we have tried to be conservative with our assessed valuation increases in future years, not continuing to count on 5% raises like we've seen the last couple of years.
I have just one comment, I appreciate what you did on slide 6 with the average salaries by group for regular assignment, where you put, here's what school professionals are, here's what executive administrators are. I think that would be worthwhile to put on the proposed FTE list.
I thought about that when I saw it, I was like, ooh, I was smart on that.
Specific to like the high school instructional mentors, that
Yeah.
is specifically addressing something from the curriculum on it.
Yeah.
Or, the classroom teachers, the elementary classroom teachers, EL, human resources, those were all specifically board budget priorities. Just
Yeah.
noting that on there, because again, I'm gonna hit that every single time it comes up. We spend all that money on that stuff. Let's highlight where we are, taking action.
Yeah.
Other than that, good job.
Any other questions, concerns, suggestions?
I would say is, we on the committee soak this up. This is not gonna be our only financial update that we get before the budget. We'll have this again next month. We'll get into this. I mean, we're in that season. And so if there are questions that you have that percolate over the next month, feel free to email myself and Heather, and so that we can help answer any of those questions around stuff. And as things come up, because that's the other thing, what we see today, projection wise, will get updated and some numbers will change.
Yes.
When we see each other next month.
Yep.
And things like that. And so, because the closer and closer we get to the budget, the closer and closer we get to know exactly what funding's gonna look
That's
like.
what I was gonna say. So another month closer to the end of the legislative session too, like a lot of our revenues will be a little more clear. But I think we have some pretty solid numbers now with what we're using as assumptions, but we'll go back through revenues and talk about what preliminary budget numbers next month and pull it all together. But I appreciate that reminder. There might be, this is still preliminary, there might be an addition, if there's FTE, but this is, we've been through this list a lot of times, like something might come up between now and then, we might have to add, that might be something different, but we're getting pretty close to what our final, or our one-time needs, we'll talk about, you know, like our FF&E that we talked about, those, what's included for next year, and those things as well.
How does 16.7 million compare to previous years? That seems large. Is it
It's
a
large.
larger than normal increase? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, because like last year, we only had like 20 or 25 new FTE. I mean,
right,
this
but
is
it was
40.
still like in the $10 million range. But we've said since August, the last 2 years since we've had this, you know, additional money that was going into fund balance again, that when our tax levy and our assessed valuation was coming in higher than what we said, that would be put back into salaries. And I think the impetus at the state level for, after not increasing the state, I think we're gonna see some movement in other districts as well, and to try and remain competitive if we're getting an additional $7 to $8 million in state foundation formula funding, that we need to continue to put that into our people to remain competitive with other districts around the state, because they're also gonna be receiving similar amounts based on their student enrollment.
And this is not an action item, so is there any other questions, comments for right now while we're in committee? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Gooch, second by Mr. Richards. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Good to see you.
Aye. All those opposed, please.
Let that linger.
All right, unanimously adjourned at 7:23.